What's going on, guys? Prepper School. I don't even know what volume it is. We've done so many. We've skipped around a little bit, but we are having question and answer today. And Robbie Wheaton's not here. He's has other plans today, so it's just going to be me. So you're stuck with the old Sootch, and we're going to try to get some questions. We always have a lot of questions, and you can start asking questions as soon as you want to. Sarah Mack's over on the computer. She's monitoring the comments, and she logs in the questions. So we can go ahead. When you guys get started, we'll get started. But one of the things, guys, is, we really live in a crazy time. I mean, it's on a lot of different fronts. And to be honest with you, most of it's, directed. And so we've really got to be on our game when it comes to being prepared. One of the big things I think up front, and we'll talk a little bit before we get to some questions. And as soon as we do, Sarah Mack's going to give me the cue. But one of the things that to me is a very important part of prepping is your group, your friends, people that are somewhat like-minded. Maybe they're just testing the water. Maybe they're seeing some things, and for the first time, they're actually thinking, it'd probably be good to put some food back, be good to put some water back, maybe go to the store and pick up some ammunition, just some things that make you more self-sufficient, more able to do what you need to do. I was talking to a law enforcement officer this weekend. We were at a big wedding, and one of the guys, he was actually a follower of the channel, and he was a law enforcement. And he said, the thing is police aren't going to come to protect you. He says, we get there after the fact. And so, guys, responsibility for self-defense is on your shoulders. It is as a head of the home, and that could be man or woman. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of single moms out there. But that could be head of the home, but then individually it goes down because that head of the home is not always at home. And so making sure that, you take care, making sure you teach your kids, the right and proper way to do things. Now, let me just go into this a little bit. I heard something this past weekend, and it was this reporter, and she had covered a lot of different burglaries. And she had interviewed a lot of guys that were in jail and in prison for burglary or home invasion. And one of the things that they all said was, not all, but about 95%, they said that if somebody's home, they go by, they pass it up. But one of the problems is, and I've been guilty of this as well, is when somebody, a salesman or somebody comes up to the door and they're knocking on the door, I get real quiet because I don't want them to know I'm inside because I don't want them to bother me. But one of the problems with that is when burglars go case a house out, that's one of the first things they do is they knock on the door. They try to see if anybody's home. Most burglaries happen between 9 and 3 o'clock during the day. Now, there are definitely exceptions. We've seen it all around. We've seen actual home invasions where they knew that you were home. But on the whole, typically making some noise inside your home, maybe having the TV going, maybe having something talking in the background, don't necessarily just think that I'm going to be quiet and whoever's at the door may pass. They may kick your door in. So, it's little things that happen that sometimes we don't really think about. Another thing that's security minded is when you walk up to a gas station. Let's say you're getting gas, you finish, you want to run in and get yourself a drink. Always, before you get to the door, stop and look inside and see what's going on. If you see a cashier that's got the fear of God on their face, then it's best just to turn around. So knowing those things, just being aware. One thing too is if somebody tells you to raise your hands, put your hands up, put your palms facing your face. The one thing you don't want is for this to get cut with a knife. And so when you do this, you can stand it here. It's a lot easier. You can still have mobilization with your hands. So, there's a lot of little things, having your head on a swivel and being situational aware. And guys, in the age of cell phones, we see people all the time walking around with their head in their phone, and they make easy victims. So we're not talking about victims or crime today, particularly. Again, this is just wide open to Q&A. And so, but I do want to just kind of give you some tips. Okay, we got a question.
Mr. Lamphil asked, question, pistol inserts for normal everyday city travel or for full armor at all times?
Pistol inserts. Well, let me. I'm not sure I know the question. So if you want to clarify it, if I don't answer it, uh, you need to have your gun loaded. There needs to be one in the chamber at all times. One in the chamber. One of the problems is, and if you ever watch active self protection, when you're pulling, a lot of times you'll see the criminals, particularly the thugs or the guys that want to rack the slide to make a statement, and a lot of times it jams. But as far as being armed, yes, I think that you should be armed at all times. According to where you live, you want to stay within the law as much as possible. And of course, the old rule, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. But, I'm not going to tell you to break the law. But for me, I won't go into a place that I can't carry unless it's a courthouse and I have to go. But typically, I stay armed. A lot of times, I do have my go bag in the back. I have it ready to roll. I have my rifle ready to roll. I have it set. So, to me, you never know where it's going to happen. Okay.
He said body armor, pistol protection, or full rifle protection.
Typically you're going to, sorry about that. Typically you're going to run into handguns most of the time. It's not often that you're going to run into a rifle situation. The other thing about rifle plates is they're heavier, they're bigger, but here's the other side of it. If I'm going to take the time to reach back and put on my plate carrier with, level 2A or level 3 body armor, why not go ahead and put on your standard rifle caliber? It kind of goes that way, both ways. If you're wearing it, obviously, that can wear on you. But I think personally, I would think you would face pistol more than you would rifle. But if you're going to have to don that thing anyway and put it on, a rifle vest would actually be, the optimum, obviously. So yeah, I would probably tend to go with rifle, come to think of it.
Gary Hernandez, Self-Defense and Urban Survival asks,
What's up,
hello
Gary?
guys, question. When building a prepper group, should you have a board of directors? Thanks, Gary.
Well, let me tell you what we do. We have our prepper group. We have a core, and the core are the ones that are there every time you have a meeting. They're there. If you're going out to dinner, if you're doing something, they're there every time. And that also, though, kind of translates to what kind of wisdom, what is their temperament. You got to look at that. You want really level heads. So we have what we call our core, and it's the guys that are there every week. We have a lot of people that come in and out, and we don't put any of those in our circle as far as our inner circle. And so here's the thing about board of directors. If you're not careful and you get this kind of really structured kind of thing, and you lose relationships. It kind of separates people. One thing we found, because we've done it in a number of different ways, is that the more we build relationships, the more we build trust, and those people that we can count on because they're there every week, those are the people that we share things with mostly, and we make decisions based on that. One thing that we're big about is when we have somebody new come in the group, it has to be unanimous. Everybody has to agree on it. And we've had issues before where somebody's been like, well, I don't know. And they've had questions. And it was good because then we were able to work through it. And, I told them, I said, look, if you don't agree, we're not going to do it. But having a really relational based group, don't get too mechanical. Don't get too structured. These people are going to make decisions. If you can really make relationships with people, when bad times come, they're going to care about you and they're going to want to help you, even though the odds may be against them. We've built our prepper group to where there are people in our group that I would risk my life for. And if I have too rigid of a structure, and I'm not saying you are, Gary, but if you have too rigid of a structure and too much of a tier process that's known to everybody, then you kind of alienate people just a little bit. You want everyone to feel like they have a say, and everybody does. But when it comes to those hard decisions, we've got a small group, and it's kind of our sage group. We make the decisions. So, you can structure it. But one thing I would definitely promote is to build on relationships before too much organization. The organization is needed, but relationships will go a long way.
Lucky13 driver says, "Hi Don, I'm trying to figure out how to get the market price of junk silver. Is there any resource you could share with us?"
Well, typically I keep an app on my phone. I think it's JM Bullion, and I can go to it and I can see the price of silver. Right now, I think it's at $25 an ounce, a little over. Gold, in fact, I just bought some gold and today, and it's on the way. So, but it is difficult because the price fluctuates. The best thing to do, and I've done this before, I don't have a formula. Typically, I'll look it up before I do it. But you can you can Google it actually and say, what should I pay for, junk silver? Because it is 90% silver. And remember that, because it's 10% copper and nickel. So that 90% is what you're paying for. But they do have to have somewhat of a little bit of a markup. And you should always realize that. And the other thing that I do when I buy, I don't I don't want to pay too much, but I don't mind paying for silver, not necessarily based on the price, but to get it in my hand, because in the long term, it's going to shoot through the roof. So as far as the way we're seeing things, and it is starting to go up, both gold and silver. So I wish I could give you a formula, but and it's something maybe I need to put myself down. But typically I'll go to Google, I'll say, how do I, what should I pay for junk silver? And it'll help you to go through it. And I've done it a number of times. One of the problems for me is I have a source that I go and here locally, and they carry. I mean, they have tons of silver, gold, all kind of stuff, and they have a set price, and I just now trust them. So when I go in, I just say, "Here's this, give me this much." So made me kind of lazy.
Dana Rogers says, "Good morning. What is a good option for someone with short thumbs and has trouble reaching safety?"
Well, find a gun that fits your hand. One of the things and here's the thing about safeties, you can get a striker fire pistol that doesn't have a safety. The safety's in the trigger, it's in the mechanism. There's 3 different safeties. This is your number one safety. So I would choose something maybe that doesn't have as short of doesn't have a safety on it. Sarah Mack, she's got smaller fingers. And that's one of the things that she has an issue with, especially with revolvers, because the trigger pull is so long. So find something, they are making some guns specifically for female shooters. In fact, the Walther PDP-F, great gun for female shooters. Smith & Wesson, some of their new EZ series, and the Equalizer. That's really great for people with smaller hands, and it's easier to rack the slide, easier to load. I mean, really the market is looking at helping people, our most vulnerable, honestly. And I think it's awesome to see this going right now. So again, go to a local gun shop and check out the different models and see where your thumb's hitting. But obviously I would go with the striker fire pistol. You don't have to worry about it.
Mr. Mike asks, 9mm nickel or brass?
Nickel, if you're reloading. Nickel has a little bit of lubricity to it that brass does not. When I was reloading, we always look for nickel brass. It's more expensive typically. But it'll be smoother in your cylinder, in your chamber. So nickel brass, but honestly, as far as for me day to day, brass is fine. But again, if I'm reloading, you can just reload it more times if you have nickel. But otherwise, it's a little harder. It's a little bit more hard. So your brass is going to be a little softer. But man, I shoot brass almost exclusively. It's my self-defense ammunition a lot of times is nickel. But I don't find really that much difference unless you're reloading.
Matthew McDonald says, "I'm new to firearms. What are some good resources for learning about them and or suggestions for shotguns and rifles that are relatively safe to have in a house with small children?"
Well, that's a loaded question, but it's one that's important to me. First off, yes, you want to have safety, but don't have too much safety that you can't get to your firearm or that it's not accessible. But putting it up high is not necessarily an answer, because kids can climb. One of the things, and it's according to how small your children are, one of the things that I did early on with my kids is to take them out and shoot 22 as soon as they were ready. I guess my youngest son, my kids were probably 4 and 5, and we were shooting 22s. So 6, 7. Now, to give them a gun, you've got to be right there with them. You got to be right on them to help them and make sure they're safe. Teach them the basic safety rules. That's very important, regardless of if you have a gun in a safe or whatever. But there are ways to be able to lock your trigger system down, and there are different type safes out there. But because with small kids, it makes it more difficult. But a good pump shotgun is what I would recommend if you're looking for a shotgun, because they are so reliable. You don't have to worry about them malfunctioning typically. But there are some really good semi-automatic shotguns out there. In fact, I just did a review on the Beretta Patrol. That thing was the A300 Patrol, but it's a more expensive shotgun. So a Mossberg 590 is a great shotgun. In fact, U.S. military uses those, and it's a fairly reasonable price compared to some others. As far as rifles go, if you're looking for home defense, an AR-15, if that's allowed in your state. I know Washington State's getting ready to lose everything like that, but a lever action rifle is very fast. If you live in a state that puts a lot of restrictions on semi-automatics, a lever action rifle is fast to load and and it holds a number of rounds. But one thing I would recommend is to start looking around, watch different YouTube videos. And there's a lot of videos talking specifically to beginners, people that are looking for the first time. We've done a number of videos like that as well. But there are a lot of options out there. I mean, we live in the golden age of firearms. There are so many different choices. But, go to your local gun shop. If you're looking for a handgun, go and do some research, and then go and put those guns in your hand. If they have a range where you can shoot them and rent them, that's even better. And it gives you an idea, because everybody's different. Everybody has a different opinion. And so, it's a journey. It's a journey. But as far as a shotgun, I would look at a Mossberg 590. If I was looking for a rifle and I wanted the most capable, an AR-15 is your best option, or an AK-47. If you're a novice to shooters, I'd probably go with an AR-15. But and then again, if you don't want something that's semi-automatic or something that looks tactical or whatever, a good lever action rifle will serve you well. So I hope that helps, but really it takes a lot of research, and that's a really big question.
Barkwell says, as someone collecting more prepping resources, have you done a video on organization, certain categories to keep your things together in totes?
Yeah, I've done some stuff, but I think it's City Prepper. I believe he does some stuff, or Urban Prepper, and he has a color code system that's awesome. And that's one thing I've really wanted to implement for myself. But, having like medical, have that color coded for red, obviously. And then, your water supplies, have it in blue, and have your, fire starting in orange. And you can make your own system, and, take your totes and measure it out. Now, for me, I have some large toolboxes, some of the big metal toolboxes. And in there, in the drawers, I have each drawer labeled on what I have in each one. So for me, if I need fire starting, I go up fire starter. I pull it out. I've got all my fire starters that I have in there. I can use them. I can grab them. I can put them in different packs and kits. But yeah, organization is probably one of the toughest things when it comes to prepping. One of the big things you want to do is make sure that you are rotating your food supplies. One thing, they have a lot of different systems. They even have them where they have these slanted can containers. And when you put a fresh can in, it comes down. And then as you put ones in the back, you pull from the front. So it automatically just rotates your food. And so that's a great way. And two, buy the food that you're going to eat. And that way you'll eat that food that you have as it gets closer to date. And we have done that in the past, where we have actually gone through our food preps, and we've eaten food from that. So yeah, there are a lot of organizations. In fact, I have a new shop here, and that's where we've been doing our videos. And I've been really organizing and doing a lot. And totes are a great way to do it. Sometimes some smaller totes for more of your specific items, larger totes for, tents and bags and tarps and things like that. And then just come up with your own codes, your own color system. And you can locate everything, because honestly, that has been, over the past few years, a real problem for me, is keeping organized. So try the color code system. I think that'll really help. And totes are definitely a big plus. Also, ammo tins or MTM case guard ammo cans. That's also a great resource.
Ken Garrett asks, do you use a vacuum sealer to store any food, etc., for later?
Yes, we do. In fact, my wife uses it quite a bit. We even use it to protect firearms. So we have ours is big enough. We have the bags big enough to where we can actually put a whole rifle and seal that thing down to be able to store it in places that are very discreet. But handguns also. But that's one of the things about having a vacuum sealer. Yes, you can take your food for a longer period of time. Over, most of your dry goods, vacuum seal will last forever. I mean, as long as they're sealed, throw in an oxygen absorber, and it's great. Mylar bags are a great way to do it. But yes, vacuum sealing is a good way to do it with foods that are there's foods that are perishable. They're going to last longer, but they're not going to last like long-term food storage. I mean, you'll have a longer shelf life. Canned food is one of the best because it'll last indefinitely with the processes they use. In fact, I did a video about it. I mean, it'll last 100 years. Yes, you will lose some of your nutritional value over time, but it will keep. And it's especially the foods that you eat regularly. And again, rotate them out.
Total Trucker asks, where can I usually buy gold and silver?
Pawn shops, gun shows, flea markets, eBay. I just purchased some gold on eBay, and it was from a reputable source. And so I was able to get it. Typically, though, I buy most of my precious metals in cash. So, but once in a while, I'll step out if I want to do something. Guys, the economy right now and the things they're talking about and this global current digital currency they're talking about, you should really be investing in some precious metals. Because once that hits, your privacy, your freedom is pretty much done for. And so, really consider, and silver right now, silver is really one of the best options. Gold is expensive. That's $2,000 an ounce and over that actually. And silver's running about $25 an ounce. So, that's the way I typically get it. A lot of times at gun shows, I bought a lot of silver at gun shows. There'll be a guy set up with a table, and he'll have a section, just have some silver little containers with quarters or 50 cent or whatever, and I bought them there. You want to kind of have an idea though of what you should pay, and we talked about that a minute ago. You need to maybe Google what the current rate is you should be paying for it. But I have a source here. It's called Upstate Gold here in Greenville. And I go to it. They keep a lot of silver, gold, a lot of junk silver. And so I go in, I trust them. I know those guys. And so I can buy it. And that's a great resource. Jewelry stores, a lot of times, have taken in silver for, different things or just for scrap because people bring in silver. So there's a lot of places out there. It's the kind of that flea market, gun show, whatever. That's the kind of auctions. Auctions are not another place.
Stephen Churchman asked, hi from Steve in Dudley, England.
Oh,
what's the best advice you can give to someone like myself who is new to prepping?
Well, you want to go with the rule of threes. We do everything based on the rule of threes. And that means you have 3 seconds without hope. So when you start prepping, you've given yourself some hope. 3 minutes without air. So you need to make sure that you have maybe some, mask or some kind of respirator, something to be able to breathe, especially if you're in a fire. And then you have 3 hours in harsh conditions. So if your power goes out and it's really super cold and you're outside, you have about 3 hours that you can deal with that. And then even in extreme heat, same thing. And then 3 days without water. Water is one of the most important things that you can prep. Having some kind of water source, whether it's a rain barrel, whether it's just stocking up water in your garage that you buy at the store. It's fairly cheap. You can buy it. You can buy the gallon jugs, but water is vital. If you have a well, in case you have a power outage, you want to be able to access the water in that well, and that can be a whole can of worms in itself. Rain catchment systems, which we have. I have a very simple one, but in certain municipalities and certain areas, it's illegal to harvest rainwater. So, you need to check those things out. Food, 3 weeks without food. You've got 3 weeks. So, and then medical and self-defense flow in between. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have your water, your food, you have something to keep you warm or keep you cool. If temperatures exceed, but of course in England, you're not going to really have to deal with that. But you want to get those basic necessities, and you want to have some fire starting capability. Build yourself a fire kit and a good knife. Now, I know in England there are some problems with that as well, but have something that you can use to cut and to be able to make fire tender do different tasks that you need to do, because that is the first tool. So those are the things. I take the rule of threes and then I go from there. And then you can start to add on from that if if you feel the need to. But you definitely want to cover your basic survival needs.
Respect God asks, what are good locations, bug out locations, or locations to store caches, stockpiles away from the city in case of an emergency?
Well, there's a lot of schools of thought. Obviously, if you live in a city, you really need to have a bug out location, somewhere that you can escape to. If things get too bad, and that's going to be the first place that's going to get the worst, is in an urban environment, is to have a brother-in-law, family, friend somewhere that lives a little bit out, at least get there. But as far as caches go, you've got to know where you put whatever you put. You've got to know, because I have a buddy of mine. He buried silver 30 years ago, a big thing of silver. A few years later, he went back. He couldn't find it. He still can't find it. He's been looking for it forever. I mean, yeah. So yeah, somebody else dug it up. So having a place, knowing exactly where you are, you got to really make sure it's not just a 3 steps this way and 5 that way. But caches can be great, especially if you have some PVC pipe. You seal up the ends. There's a number of different containers they sell for caches. But one thing about going out is when you go out into another community, and let's say you want to go to a rural community, the problem is they don't know you. A lot of times people say, well, I'm just going to go to the mountains. Well, I have a buddy of mine that's a sheriff of this county that's in the mountains. And they already planned that if something goes down, they're blocking off access to their area, the major freeways. They're going to block them off. They don't want a ton of people coming up there. It puts a lot of strain on their resources. So, you've got to really think this through before you have a bug out location. If you do have a bug out location, or maybe you bought a small piece of property and you have a small little cabin there, get to know your neighbors, because those places could get raided just like anybody else. I mean, people can find things. So there needs to be a lot of thought put into bugging out, security around your bug out. Somebody will come up, they can get in there and they'll steal your stuff. In Argentina, when they had their economic collapse, people went to bug out and gangs followed them and took their stuff and killed them, raped them, did a lot of things. It was horrible. And those are actual events that happen. So bug out to me is a glorified refugee, but having things put aside and hidden away, is definitely is something that can really come in handy. But it takes a lot of thought. One thing we've done, we have a storage building. It's actually a storage unit, me and a buddy of mine, and we call it our emergency storage unit. And we both have emergency supplies in that unit. It's away from our house. Now that could be compromised, but if for some reason we have to get out, we can go to that storage unit and grab the supplies we might need. So, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But geocaching, if you're into that, but who knows if we have the internet, who knows if we have the things we need to find that, in a grid down situation. So I hate to be kind of all over the place, but that's a big question as well.
GB09 asks, if you're looking for a 10mm pistol, which would you recommend and would be the best and easiest to keep in the fight? The Glock 20, the Smith & Wesson, or the Springfield XDM?
Well, my brother he wanted a 10mm, and he's on the search for it. He had really chosen the Glock. Once he shot the Springfield Armory, though, because he came down and we shot a number of different ones, he ended up choosing the Springfield Armory because the ergonomics is a little better. The Smith & Wesson 10mm, I love the ergonomics on it. That's my favorite, the Smith & Wesson 10mm. But if I had one 10mm, it would be the Glock Model 20, because it is just uber reliable and it'll go through hell and back. So, and they've just come out with their Gen 5, so they have a little bit of a smaller grip. And in fact, I've got a Model 20. Well, they came out with a Model 21, so the Model 20 is coming. So we're going to see. We're going to be doing a review on it and checking the size out. But Glock 20, if I had one 10mm to grab, it'd be the Glock 20, and probably the Glock 29 because it's a little bit more small.
DLLNBMS7 asks, how often do you swap out your carry ammo? Would it be better to reload for self-defense ammo or just get factory loaded ammo?
For self-defense ammo, I would get factory ammo, and what I really like are the Hornady, um, critical defense or critical duty. I love the tip; it keeps from clogging it up. And the critical duty is a little bit heavier grain bullet than the critical defense. They're great rounds. What I do to rotate my ammunition is every once in a while I'll take my self-defense ammunition and I'll shoot the mag. I'll actually shoot through it, and then I'll replace it with more ammunition. So that gives me some training. Plus, it keeps my ammunition from just sitting in that magazine too long. But as far as what I would recommend, I mean, probably once a month. It would be the most I would change that out. I mean, for me. Now, some people won't. They'll go home right then and they'll unload that magazine. One of the things about magazines is the more you load them and unload them, it causes some tension. It causes working of the springs. But when you're shooting it, you're unloading it and loading it. So, but a lot of times I'll leave guns loaded for an extended period of time, and I don't really have any problems with them. But if you shoot them a lot, you tend to have more issues. When I say a lot, I'm talking about thousands of rounds. So, but I would, once a month, and then maybe if you want to go to the extreme, once every quarter. But I would probably err on, I probably wouldn't go to every 3 months, maybe once a month, and then rotate it out and then shoot your ammunition.
Jay Carroll says, knowing how close we are to war with China, what items made in China would you recommend we stock up on besides medicines?
Well, yeah, that's a sad thing, isn't it? Medicines. I think as far as items, Harbor Freight, they have a lot of different supplies like tarps and different things like that you can get fairly inexpensively. I would still get the better quality tarp, but tarps. I mean, America. As far as survival stuff, it's like I like American-made knives. That's what I typically carry. I like water filtration systems. Typically they're made here in the U.S. And I'm sure there are a lot that are made in China, but I really like I like the Frontier filters, but I like the Berkey as far as our house. As far as really, I mean, in a grid down situation, there's not going to be a whole lot from China that's coming over. Flashlights. I mean, obviously, I'm a big Olight fan, and I like my flashlights, and I like to be able to recharge them even on a battery backup. And they have one of the best charging systems. So making sure that I have good flashlights. But see, like your computers, your phones, things like that, your cameras, a lot of the stuff that China does really well, they're not going to be of use or going to be of limited use. So I don't, come to think of it, I'm not really sure what I would actually stock up on from China. I think the things I would be stocking up on are things we have here in the U.S. because that we've got a lot of things covered here.
Railroad Roamer says, how should I store my loaded AR magazines for quick access but protected from humidity?
What's up, Travis? I would ammo boxes. If you're concerned about humidity, military ammo tins, they seal. They have a seal around them. I'd make sure that it didn't have any dry rot. Put a little bit of silicone lube on there just to keep it fresh. But military tins are great. I mean, they'll keep stuff for a long time, and they'll keep the humidity out. Throw in some oxygen absorbers to help. But that would be the way I would do it. The MTM case guard cans also have that gasket around it, and they would probably be suitable. And two, they have certain cans that actually have slots for magazines. And so that's probably the most organized way to do it. The one thing I like about ammo tins is that they're sturdy. I mean, I can step on them. Something can fall on them. It's not going to matter. I can walk on them. I can throw them. But the big problem though with that is they're heavy. And so, a MTM case guard magazine carrier, those things are great. And that's what I would do right now because we use magazines all the time. We have this giant wooden crate and I keep my AR mags in there. But yeah, humidity, maybe with the springs, it could cause a little bit of an issue.
Mr. Mike asks, have you heard any news on the Berkey lawsuit?
No, we've been trying to figure all that stuff out. We have relied on the Berkey for a number of years. Um, and, I mean, we've used it. Of course, we use tap water through it. We have done other type waters through it. So at this point right now, we're just waiting to see and trying to get more information when we get it figured out. But, there are some other systems that are starting to come online, but Berkey has been the tried and true for a long time. So, um, and I don't know all the details of the lawsuit. In fact, my wife has asked me 3 or 4 times. She goes, "What do you know about that?" And I'm like, "I haven't had time to check it out." So that's something that I need to kind of check up. And I promoted Berkey for a long time, so I really need to do something about it on a video and talk about it. So once I get all the information together, I will.
Chuck Torbett asked, how could people keep cool in the summer during a grid down situation? It can be rough down here in Florida after a hurricane without a way to keep cool.
One thing that traditionally people have done is taken sheets and made it and wet sheets that are damp and hang them up in a window, an open window. And the window, when the wind blows, it actually it makes it cooler in the house. That's probably one of the biggest things. Of course, being outside under shade, if you have a little bit of a breeze, that makes it nice. But really, other than that, there are different things that people do. One thing a guy would do is put a lot of frozen water in his freezer, and so then he could pull it out, and it would actually cool the area around him, cool the area. But in Florida, I've been there. Believe me, I know how it is, and it can get super hot. But I think that's one thing I think with sheets in the windows and you damp them and you put them in there and let the wind blow, it will help keep your house cool. And obviously, fans are going to be with no power. You're not going to have a fan or anything else, but that's about all I've got on that.
Lucky 13 driver says, question, do you have any tips for preparing for elderly parents? We live in a hurricane zone, which is what we mainly concentrate our preps towards.
Well, I face that. My mom and dad are in their 80s. They live next door to us. I mean, they're doing good, but they do need us we go by all the time. We're there all the time. And it is something that we've thought about. The thing is with elderly parents, it's not like you're going to throw on a backpack and take off down in the woods with your elderly parents. I'm having a hard time saying elderly, but that is a problem. So they're going to need a lot of the things that we just basically need, like food and water, things like that. But with medications, that could be an issue, especially if it's medications that are keeping them healthy and alive and going. And two, medications, a lot of times doctors won't prescribe medications out past a certain time. So, that to me, for a lot of older people, is going to be an issue. So, it's just you're going to be moving slower and you're not going to be as mobile, but I mean, they're your parents and, you've got to take care of them. So, my big plan though is not to bug out. I mean, that it has to get really ugly for me to have to bug out because I'm leaving my supplies. I'm a glorified refugee. I may have my parents with me. Then I'm a refugee with my parents, and my family. And so, it's just one of those things. You just got to think, what are their needs and how mobile are they and being able to get them. And two, there's different degrees of mobility. Some people are bedridden. Some people are in a wheelchair, having walkers and things like that. I mean, you want to having a checklist of things that you need to take with you in case of an emergency and get out of Dodge. That would probably be good to have. Make sure they're taking their medications, make sure that they have their, if they need assistance walking and if they need walkers or canes and things like that, to put that aside. So it's tough. That's a tough one.
Dana Rogers asked, any suggestions for a nuclear shelter for the common person, minimum funds?
Well, for one thing, it's according to where you live, as far as if you live in a zone that either has a nuclear reactor or has a military base, a pretty major military base, those typically can be more of or a large city if they decide to do something like that. I mean, that would seem to me like it'd be pretty inhumane, but nuclear war is inhumane. Normally, the problem is if you're outside of the blast zone, you can survive. As long as you don't get caught up in the fallout. One of the things about fallout, and I think it's a 32-mile radius around like a nuclear reactor. That 32-mile radius, you need to be outside of that. And then if there is fallout, you need to be in a shelter. Now, obviously, a concrete shelter is the best. But even if you're in your home, you can go into the centermost part of your house that doesn't have windows, or down into a basement and get in there and just stay down there for a couple of days. One of the things you need to remember is that as fallout falls, it loses 80% of its radioactivity before it hits the ground. Still doesn't mean that it's not radioactive. But for every day that you remain inside in an enclosed area, then the danger lessens and lessens and lessens. So, the big thing is to get inside, get somewhere, change your clothes if you can, take your clothes off, put it in a bag, wrap it up, put it somewhere else, and then wash off if you can. And then make sure that you are in an area that's really sealed. And I don't mean sealed completely. I mean, if you have a room in the center of your house somewhere that you can get that doesn't have windows, that's not necessarily on the outside wall, you have a lot of protection there. Another thing too is to have potassium iodide pills. Those are easy to get. You can go on Amazon, eBay, whatever. I mean, what they do is you take them and it fills your thyroid. So if there's a nuclear blast and radiation will be attracted to your thyroid. So what you want to do is take the potassium iodide. It fills your thyroid so that the nuclear radiation can't penetrate. And that is one of that's something that everyone or all the civil defense plans is people need to take potassium iodide. And it's not as much as you would think, but you need to have like for a few days, and typically the radiation starts to drop. Now, if you're in the blast zone, it doesn't matter, But what's really funny is during World War II, there was a Japanese salesman, and he was in, and I apologize for not remembering which one was first. I think Hiroshima was first, but when the bomb went off, he was in Hiroshima. He was transported because he was burned and a lot of other things to Nagasaki, and the bomb was there. He survived and lived to be in his 90s. Now, those bombs are not anywhere near what we have today in sense of, megatons, but it is survivable. It's highly survivable if you take steps. But first, get yourself inside and get the clothes off you have. If you're getting contaminated with the fallout, get your clothes off, and that's going to go a long way. And the potassium iodide is definitely something to consider to have on hand.
Frank M. says, most preppers say to build community and establish a network. Any advice on finding the like-minded folks to do this? Any organizations that are obvious in, say, church or Boy Scouts?
Church, Boy Scouts. Yeah, Boy Scouts, typically, they're a little bit more independently minded. I have a lot of friends that are Boy Scouts, and a lot of them are prep, guys that their kids go to Boy Scouts. They're already, that's their motto, be prepared. Church is one of the best places. Getting friends, guys that you go shoot with, guys that you do stuff with, your neighbors, getting to know your neighbors. Because here's the thing, right now, your neighbor may be, I don't really see a need. When things start to go south, if you've already been talking to him a little bit, then he'll start to come to you. So, the big thing is to make friends, get to know people. And then the people that tend to be, minded the same way you are. One of the things I call it's like fishing. And so I may say, man, things are really going crazy right now. Have you heard about this? And I watch their reaction. If they go, yeah, I saw that. Wow. And then they just kind of don't, that's just a passing thought, then I don't waste my time. But if then they go, oh man, yeah, have you seen what's happening with those banks? And then you can kind of just lead it a little bit. Here's the big thing that this is the biggest problem a lot of people do, is they'll talk to somebody and they'll go, man, have you heard about this? Heard about that? What about this? Look, the food, all these chicken farms are burning up. Look at this chemical spill right here. Oh, they're trying to take our guns. You overwhelm people and they run from you. So, don't overload them. Just give them a little bit and see where they are, because you can't make them prep. They have to make that decision on their own. And one thing I've said, we've had people in our prepper group and, oh, they're all gung ho at first. And then they never come to any meetings. We never get them. We never see them hardly ever. And I'd call them, and I just decided I'm not going to push a rope. It doesn't work. And really what I want that person with me in an emergency situation, if they're not even have the wherewithal to do that, they're not going to have the wherewithal when it comes down to it. So looking for good quality people. I mean, it is tough. It is tough. But when things start to happen, people are more open. And that's when you need to kind of just do a little trolling. Is what I call it. Just do a little trolling, a little fishing. And before long, if you get into a conversation with somebody, you might have a connection, might be somebody that you can be friends with and then start to work together on things.
Tyler Wellick asks, is it better to buy one more expensive AR-15 or a couple cheaper AR-15s like PSA?
Well, let me tell you something about PSA. I used to think that those guns, had to be made in China. They had to be getting parts from somewhere because, but they make all the parts in their South Carolina facilities. I've been there. I've seen their barrels. I mean, they have a state-of-the-art system to make barrels. PSA, the reason it's cheaper is because they sell direct. They don't sell to distributors and all these gun shops and all this stuff. You won't typically go into a gun shop and find a PSA rifle that's not this brand new. That's because you buy it directly from PSA. Now, they'll transfer it to your gun shop. So they're cutting out a lot of the middleman. Honestly, the barrel and the bolt carrier group are the heart of your rifle. Everything else is superficial. Everything else. So, I mean, yeah, you can get an M-lock handguard and all that, but that's just additions. As far as the rifle itself, your bolt carrier and your barrel are number one. So PSA would be a great choice, especially I would have two for sure. Two is one is none. Having a really nice rifle. Now, my go-to rifle is a BCM because they just make great rifles. So if you want to say, hey, you know what, I want a BCM. But then you want to have some parts kits, even though the BCMs run great, but you still want to have parts kits and you can get them. I mean, there's tons of sources out there, builders kits, but a lot of times they have all the parts you need to be able to replace things to maintain your rifle. And you want to know how to do it. So, it's a journey, but I think that to me, honestly, if I did not have an AR-15, I would go out and buy two PSA rifles. Now, for me, I have a number of PSA rifles, so BCM is that's my go-to. So, yeah, but I would give a high regards to Palmetto State Armory.
Real Shield says, have you heard where Texas wants to start a gold-backed cryptocurrency?
I've heard rumblings, and I think that is awesome. I mean, does it not make sense? Does it not? That's what China's doing. China's building up their gold reserves. They are bringing in massive amounts of gold. The U.S., we've dumped our gold reserves. So, and that's the thing about precious metals, guys, is that if countries do it to stabilize their financial security, why would we not do that? I mean, personally, listen, it's not taking gold and silver out there and you're doing an investment and one day you're going to make a bunch of money on it. No, it protects your wealth. And if the banks collapse or if things happen or inflation soars, gold and silver rise. And a lot of times you can take and pay off your car, pay off your home with what was really maybe $3,000 or $4,000 worth of gold or silver, and it turns into $30,000 worth of gold and silver in value. It doesn't really increase in value. It's just inflation's eating up everything else. So, yes, and good to see you, Ray. Or good that you joined us.
Robin Virginia asks, if you have some of each, silver, junk silver, and gold, which of these three would you bulk up?
Well, there are two different philosophies. One thing I love about some people buy rounds, some people buy bullion. I typically don't buy bullion because I want people to know if I pull out a silver dime and they can see that it's pre-64 or 64 and below, they know it's a dime, then I have that value. They have confidence in any kind of barter or trade, or if I'm giving it. A lot of shops opened up in 2008 taking silver as tender. So I like to have junk silver. I like to have different denominations. I like to have the dimes, the quarters, the 50 cent, the dollars. But the problem with silver is it's heavy. So if you're really bulking up on a lot. Whereas you can take one gold coin that weighs 100 or less than what the silver weighs, and then you can transport it. But the problem is the silver is going to be expensive. I mean, the gold is going to be expensive to barter. So let's say you really need something and all you have is a quarter round. I mean, those things are $600. And what I see of value is worth 100, but I really have to have it. Well, then you're gonna end up losing. So I like to have a mix. I like to have my junk silver. If you want to get walking liberties in silver, that's fine too. Have something that people know what it is. And then with gold, gold's going to be more expensive, but it's going to be lighter. So, if you're going to put in a lot, I would definitely bulk up on the gold and then have a good stash of junk silver to be able to barter and trade with.
Ting Ting asks, I have a 50-pound bag of flour that rats chewed a corner out. Can I use the rest of the flour if I make it into hardtack after putting it in the freezer a few days?
Yeah, I think what I would do is get that one area and just come up from it and just cut it off. That would probably be, I wouldn't throw the whole bag away just because they got into a corner of it. But making hardtack, the thing is with flour, it doesn't have a real long shelf life. So you definitely want to put it into something else. And hardtack is a great option because it'll last for a long time. But yeah, I wouldn't be afraid of it. Plus you're baking it, you're putting it up to temperature, and that's going to kill anything. But I was watching Survivor the other day, or Alone. I think it was Alone. And guy was he was using deadfall traps and catching mice and eating them. But when they're in urban areas, they can pick up diseases. So, but I think you'll be fine.
Chosen to Preach says, question, have you heard the run on the banks here in California? There was a run on 2 banks where people took out money. Would you suggest having your money in a bank or at home for when SHTF?
Well, if number one, I don't want to recommend to somebody to go out and take all their money out of the bank, just because I don't want to be responsible for it. Me personally, when the first bank failed, the Silicon Valley Bank, I was considering going to the bank and withdrawing a large sum of cash. We held off. We didn't do it. But we were taking a chance because if they would have had a number of bank runs, but what I would recommend is having a decent amount of cash. Don't have all your money in the bank. Have a good supply of cash at home. The problem is you don't want it to be stolen. The second thing, is you could have a fire in your home and it could burn it up. So, there's some vulnerability with having cash at home. We always keep cash. We've kept it for years. We stock up. We make sure we have a nice supply of it. But as far as the banks go, and this is what I'm doing now, instead of me pulling money out of the bank, I've been purchasing gold and silver and I'm putting it back. Because here's the other part about cash. If we have a bank run, if we have bank runs across the country and people are pulling all their cash out, the value of the dollar is going to go to zero. I mean, it's going to be worthless. So then you've got all this cash. But the one thing about having cash is if ATMs go out or if stores, they're not taking cards, they will at first take cash. Sooner than later, though, it's that people are going to stop taking cash because it's going to be worthless. So, you don't want to have a massive amount of cash and then find yourself with inflation eating it up. You don't want to necessarily have it in the bank and lose it there. So, I'm telling you, gold and precious metals, it's God's currency. It's been a means of currency since the beginning, since it was invented or found, since it was mined. Gold and silver have been used for that purpose, and it will continue. Maybe it'd have to be in a black market situation, but it'll continue to have value. People all the time will get on here, and there'll be somebody in the comments now. Well, I need gold and silver. I'm going to buy brass and lead. And okay, yeah, I get that. I've got all that too. But the thing is you think about COVID, and COVID doesn't really kind of relate to gold and silver in a sense, but we didn't have to use guns and whatever. I mean, we had them, but, they had a run on ammunition. But, I mean, it wasn't like that kind of situation. So having gold and silver, I can barter and trade. Having firearms, you can barter and trade. And that's another thing that firearms do offer. But governments can come in and put restrictions on transferring firearms to where, I've got all these guns that I was going to barter and trade with. Now the government's come in like they did in Argentina. That's what they did. They came in, people had stocked up ammunition to trade. And the government came in and said, you can't sell ammunition unless you have a license. And they'd come in and arrest people for selling ammunition, even though the streets were running wild. So it's a balance. I like to have some tangible gold and silver. I like to have some cash. Bank account, I just watch it. But guys, honestly, if you have a bank run, they don't have enough cash to give you. So it can be a real disaster. Okay, I think we're coming down. We'll take one more question. I think we're coming down to the end. Man, that's gone by quick, guys.
Matt Craig says, question, what made you realize you needed to start prepping? Was it your whole life or something you discovered later on?
Well, I grew up with my parents were big, grew up in a Christian family. My grandparents, it's funny. My grandparents, they had a farm. They grew all their vegetables. They had cattle. They canned. My grandpa fished a lot. He caught fish. They would have big fish fries. And what I didn't realize as a kid is that they were preppers. I mean, he could have been self-sufficient if he wanted to. Now you have to go to the store and get things, but he always lived that way. And a lot of it had to do with coming out of the Great Depression. My family, my parents, they were big on, my mom particularly, was about Revelation. And Revelation spells out everything we're looking at today, guys, whether you're a Christian or not. You can call it Nostradamus or whatever, but it's all happening. And it doesn't always happen super fast. Things take time to happen, but they are unfolding. This digital currency, take that and put it with the mark of the beast. I mean, it's like, okay, that could really be an easy transition. I'm not saying digital currency is the mark of the beast, but what I am saying is we're moving toward that kind of system. So for me, when I was much younger, I started noticing things and I thought, and two, government overreach. I mean, you had Waco, you had Randy Weaver, you've had all those things going on. And then the assault weapons ban. I mean, during that time, people really started looking around going, what is going on? And so that's really what kind of led me to really start kind of putting some things back. And then from then on, I just started doing it. And then it just became more and more evident that we are not going in a good direction. And I need to make sure that I have the survival items that I need for me and my family. So like I told my son one time, he was in the garage. We were reorganizing. We had done some stuff in the garage. So we were reorganizing our food preps. He was about 12. And we were moving some boxes around. And he stopped and he said, Dad, why in the world do we have all this food here? And I stopped and I said, look, if something were to happen, let's say we had some kind of problem. And I said, we have food. We don't have to worry about it. We can eat and we're going to be able to eat. I said, but let's say that I'm not storing up food. I said, first off, I've been shooting most of my life, competitive shooting, training, doing all kind of stuff, did martial arts, wrestled in high school. I mean, you name it, I've done that kind of stuff. I said, so what is stopping me? If I look at you and you don't have food to eat, what's stopping me from going up and down our street and just taking what I want? I'm not going to let you die. You'll die of hunger. I can't sit there and do that. What's going to keep me from doing that? I said, now, first off, I'm a Christian, so I'm not going to do that. I said, but I'm going to keep the temptation down by storing up food, water, and supplies to take care of my family. And guys, if that's the only reason you do it, get yourself in at least a decent situation. It could be 1 month. Just 1 month of groceries, 1 month of canned food, water stored back, some medical supplies if you need it. Make sure you have a little extra ammunition and buy ammunition while you can, guys, because we'll probably have some more with all this stuff that's been going on lately. We'll have a mass shooting and ammunition will go through the roof and they'll start all that stuff again. Do something. And everything you do puts you in better shape than it did before you did it. You don't have to go wild. You don't have to run to the store and get a big grocery cart slam full of stuff or go to Costco and buy everything you can possibly, drain your bank account, run your credit cards up. No, I'm not telling you to do that. Do something and start building and do it. Just do it. If it's going to the store today by yourself, some beans and rice, dried beans and rice. Buy yourself some canned corn. Buy yourself some beanie weenies. I mean, whatever. Get yourself in a decent shape, and you will be better off. And you can weather through what you're dealing with. Because, guys, we don't know what's going to happen in the next year or so with bank failures, with Russia, China, with an out-of-control administration that's trying to go freaking green no matter what happens, and they're banning all this stuff, and they're trying to put the squeeze on us, our dependence on fossil fuels, and a lot of other stuff. And then you got some of these mass shooters that are, doing their thing. I mean, there's a lot going on. So it doesn't mean that you are fearful. But here's the thing. Don't be scared. Be prepared. That's what my buddy Southern Prepper said. And that really is the way you should be. Guys, thanks. A lot of great questions. I know I kind of threw this up at the last minute, so I was really excited that you guys kind of kicked in. And great to have you here. Again, really, Robbie will probably be here next week. We will be going to NRA coming up this weekend. We love to go because of the vendors. If you don't like NRA, it's one thing, but the gun industry is there in force, and it's great to at least support them. So I'm going to go. I'll be at Century Arms at the booth there on Friday at 12 o'clock. I don't have the booth number, but I'll be there at 12 o'clock at the Century Arms booth doing a meet and greet. So if you want to come down, I think they're doing some giveaways too. So thanks for being here, guys. We want you to be prepared. That is my mission. That is what I want for you. We're going to be preparing. I want you to make sure you take prepping seriously because, guys, be sensible, but prep. Big thanks to Sarah Mack for being over there monitoring the questions. And thanks again for coming. Be strong. Be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.